Hi, in my various battle accounts in New Zealand wars, I mentioned different British military regiments who served here. This video will briefly discuss their service in New Zealand, and since this isn't a vlog channel, I'll show some of the artefacts that they left behind in sites around the country, along with any historic photographs or paintings of the troops I can find. I cannot go into any huge detail on any particular regiment, as there's quite a few of them to get through. Let's get started. In numerical order, the 12th East Suffolk Regiment arrived in Australia in 1854, transferring to New Zealand in 1860, and served in the country until 1867, departing for England during the staged withdrawal of British forces that was initiated by General Cameron in 1865. They saw action in the First Taranaki War, the invasion of the Waikato, and a detachment fought in the Battle of Gate Parr. The 14th Buckinghamshire Regiment arrived in New Zealand in 1860, coming from Cork, Ireland, and like the 12th remained here until 1867. They took part in the Siege of Te Arai in Taranaki, the invasion of the Waikato, a detachment fought at Gate Parr alongside the 12th, and they were part of General Shute's South Taranaki campaign. According to James Cowan, they had a rivalry with the 57th Regiment. The 18th Royal Irish Regiment came directly from England in 1863, remaining here until 1870, which made them the last British regiment to be stationed in New Zealand. However, they took a backseat role in the later phases of the New Zealand Wars, as the colonial forces were the ones clashing with Maori. I should do a video at some point giving an overview of the New Zealand Wars, talking about the different campaigns for those not familiar with them. The 18th served in the Waikato invasion, Cameron's Lame Seagulls March, Shute's 1866 campaign, and as I said, took a passive role after that. The 40th Somerset Regiment transferred from Australia in 1860, returning to England in 1866. They served in the First Taranaki War, where they played a large role in the Battle of Puketaku-Uere, where the British were soundly defeated, losing 30 men killed and 34 wounded, mainly from the Grenadier Company of the 40th. They took part in the invasion of the Waikato, and remained there as an occupying force until their departure home. The 43rd Monmouthshire Light Infantry arrived in New Zealand in 1863 from Calcutta, India. They were part of the invasion of the Waikato and played a major role at Gate Parr and Tauranga in the Bay of Plenty. The rout at Gate Parr humiliated the regiment, a humiliation they were able to more or less erase with the victory at Tauranga. In 1866 they returned to England, having spent 15 years in foreign service. Soldiers from the 50th Queen's Own Regiment arrived in New Zealand from Australia briefly in 1834, making them the first British Army regiment to fight Maori alongside naval forces from the corvette HMS Alligator. They attacked Te Namu and Waimate Pa in South Taranaki as part of a mission to rescue hostages from the shipwrecked Harriet. There was a review of the affair in the House of Commons that criticised the military for use of excessive force. After this, the 50th returned to Australia, transferring to India in 1841, and serving there until returning to England in 1848. They fought in the Crimean War, later going to Ceylon, now Sri Lanka, then in 1863 returned to New Zealand, taking part in the invasion of the Waikato, the Lame Seagull March, and Shute's Taranaki campaign. In 1866 they departed for Sydney. They had the nickname the Dirty Half-Hundred, as soldiers who wiped sweat from their faces with their cuffs, which were black, got black smears on their faces. The 57th West Middlesex Regiment transferred to New Zealand from Madras, India in 1860. They fought in the First Taranaki War and remained in Taranaki for almost their entire tour of duty, under the very capable Colonel War. Damn, that's a great name for a military commander. Colonel War. They fought at Katikara, Kaitake, and Potoko, served in Shute's campaign. They took heavy casualties at Otapawa, where General Shute ordered them in a costly frontal assault on a traditional hilltop pa. 11 soldiers were killed and 20 wounded. A notable deserter from the 57th, Kimball Bent, has provided us with an insider's account of life with Te Tokuwaru's army in South Taranaki. The 57th departed New Zealand in 1866. The 58th Rutlandshire Regiment came from Sydney, Australia in 1845. They served in the Northern War, seeing action at Pukitutu, Ohaiwai, and Ruapekapeka. They remained in the country, being attacked at Bulcott's Farm and fighting at Horikuri in the Wellington campaign, and at St John's Wood in Wanganui. They constructed the Rutland Stockade in Wanganui, making a permanent mark in that town. They departed New Zealand in 1858. The 65th, 2nd Yorkshire North Riding Regiment of Foot arrived from Australia in 1846 and stayed until 1865. They were the first regiment to depart in the staged withdrawal of British forces from New Zealand, but after having been stationed here for 19 years, they had more than earned their tickets home. They served in Wellington, Wanganui, the Taranaki Wars, the invasion of the Waikato, and a detachment was at Gate Pa. Their actions during their long service to New Zealand won them the respect of Maori, who nicknamed them the Hickety Pips. The 68th Durham Light Infantry arrived in New Zealand from Burma in 1864, seeing action at Gate Pa and Tauranga in the Bay of Plenty. At Gate Pa, they were accused of firing on the 43rd and Naval Brigade as part of that defeat, and like the 43rd, they were able to regain face due to their performance at Tauranga. They took part in Shute's campaign around Mount Taranaki and returned to England in 1866. The 70th Surrey Regiment arrived in New Zealand in 1863, seeing action at Katikara and Taranaki, and then taking part in the invasion of the Waikato, returning to Taranaki for the Battle of Kaitaki, and for Shute's campaign. Trevor Shute was the colonel of the 70th, promoted to Brigadier General in 1863. He took command of the British troops stationed in Australia. When the 70th returned to England in 1866, they'd been serving overseas for 17 years. The 80th Staffordshire Volunteers had a very minimal presence in New Zealand. A detachment of them was stationed in the Bay of Islands from 1840 until 1845. Luckily for them, they returned to Australia before the Northern War broke out. The 96th Regiment arrived in New Zealand piecemeal from 1841 on. The whole regiment was finally transferred from Hobart by 1845, and they had the dubious privilege of garrisoning Kororareka when it was attacked and destroyed. They fought in the Northern War and in the Wellington campaign, and returned to Tasmania in 1847. The 99th Lanarkshire Volunteers arrived in 1845, serving in the Northern War at Ahaiwai and Ruapekapeka. Along with the 96th, they went south for the Wellington campaign, where they took part in the construction of a road connecting Johnsonville to Porirua. In 1847, they returned to Sydney. Now we leave the numbers behind. The Royal Artillery has a simple motto, ubique, meaning everywhere, and it's apt. They've served everywhere the British Army has been in New Zealand, operating the artillery pieces used to bombard the various pa attacked by the infantry. Notably, Captain Mercer's gunners found themselves used as a storming party in the Battle of Rangaruri, launching an utterly doomed assault that I discuss in my Rangaruri video. I'll go through the many artillery pieces used in the New Zealand wars in a separate video. The Royal Corps of Sappers and Miners and the Royal Engineers were everywhere too, and the engineers share the Royal Artillery's mottos. They are responsible for road and bridge making and the design of many barracks and field fortifications, some of which are still visible in the New Zealand landscape. They are also important in the design of SAPs. SAPs are offensive earthworks and were used by both British and Maori forces. I'll discuss British field fortifications in New Zealand in a future video. I have a particular fondness for the Royal Engineers, as they were the masterminds behind the fortifications that I love to study. Given all the fighting going on here, the Army Medical Department and Army Hospital Corps were very much needed to provide healthcare for the many soldiers around the country. They are attached to the various other Army units. As I mentioned in my Rangaroo video, one assistant surgeon, William Temple, in the Royal Artillery, won the Victoria Cross for tending to wounded soldiers while under fire. The Commissariat Staff Corps, with the Military Train and the Horse Transport Corps, were responsible for supplying the army with all the food, fuel and other items they needed to keep operating in the field. The rough New Zealand countryside created a lot of problems for members of these regiments, and supply issues dogged the Northern War and the Waikato War in particular. In the Waikato War, the wrecking of the steamer Avon created a supply crisis that nearly saw the British Army put into retreat. The timely arrival of the new steamer Kohiroa re-established this tenuous supply chain shortly before the flank march around Patarangi, which gave the army access to the rich food supplies of Rangiawhia and Te Awamutu. The Royal Marines and the Royal Navy have a long history with New Zealand. The Endeavour was a naval vessel, and when Cook arrived in New Zealand in 1769, 2 days after landfall there was an outbreak of violence in Poverty Bay, beginning the history of British and Maori conflict. As an island nation, Royal Navy vessels were able to project power all around the coastline, and quite a few Maori pa were subjected to bombardment from naval warships. Maori learnt from this and moved inland if they were in conflict with the government. Often the naval brigades found themselves employed as artillerymen, transporting ships' guns inland to attack these positions. Royal Marines and Naval Seamen were employed as ground troops all around the country, for example at Kororareka, Otuihu, Pukitutu, Ohaiwai and Ruapekapeka in the Northern War. They conducted the kidnapping of Tauropraha and the attack on Motu Karaka in the Wellington campaign, as well as river actions in the Wanganui and the Waikato. They fought at the Battle of Waireka in Taranaki and launched major assaults on formidable Maori positions at Rangaruri and Gate Pa. These are the various imperial units that took part in the New Zealand Wars. The government also had an array of colonial and Maori troops who would play an increasingly important role in the conflict once the British troops began withdrawing from the country. No British cavalry regiments ever made it out here. However, there were locally raised cavalry units, particularly the Colonial Defence Force Cavalry. When these regiments departed, the soldiers often had the option to discharge in New Zealand and become a military settler here. So quite a few Kiwis have a British soldier from the wars in their family tree. There are a few reenactors here in New Zealand, primarily reenacting as the 65th Regiment and the New Zealand Armed Constabulary. The 65th Regiment Reenactment Group is based at Howick Historic Village in Auckland. They have fully costumed live days every month. I'll put links to their website in the description if you want to learn more. I hope this video provides a bit of background on the Imperial troops so that when I use the various regimental numbers in my discussions of battles, you've got a bit more context. Also, for scholars of the Crimea and the Indian Mutiny, this may illustrate that regiments you have studied served here in New Zealand, and it may be well worthwhile looking into their service here. Thanks for watching. Please share, comment and subscribe. Cheers!